the chicken and the egg are really not that separate in terms of what really came first. But as Aristotle said, there was not a first man who came from another man, but actually what existed in that realm always existed. And this is not something we will ever clear up, science or otherwise. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was with God in the beginning. Through him all things were made. Without him nothing was made that has been made. In him was life, and that life was the light of all mankind. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. There was a man sent from God whose name was John. He came as a witness to testify concerning that light, so that through him all might believe. He himself was not the light. He came only as a witness to the light. The true light that gives light to everyone was coming into the world. He was in the world, and though the world was made through him, the world did not recognize him. He came to that which was his own, but his own did not receive him. Yet to all who did receive him, to those who believed in his name, he gave the right to become children of God, born not of natural descent, nor of human decision or a husband's will, but born of God. The Word became flesh and made his dwelling among us. We have seen his glory, the glory of the one and only Son, who came from the Father, full of grace and truth. John testified concerning him. He cried out, saying, "This is the one I spoke about when I said, 'He who comes after me has surpassed me because he was before me.' Out of his fullness we have all received grace in place of grace already given. For the law was given through Moses. Grace and truth came through Jesus Christ. No one has ever seen God but the one and only Son, who is himself God and is in closest relationship with the Father, has made him known." Okay, that cleared everything up, didn't it? Well, I hope you're not expecting to leave here today with a full and complete understanding of everything that this passage says and implies. In fact, if that's what you expect from any sermon on any passage, from any preacher, then you're expecting something you'll probably never get. But if you are expecting that on this passage, in a sermon from this preacher, you may be especially disappointed. Someone has said that the Gospel of John is a book in which a child can wade and an elephant can swim. And what he meant by that is it's not so difficult to understand what is being said in John. A child can understand most of what is said because they're direct claims, even in that passage. They're direct claims, and direct claims are easy to understand, and John makes very direct claims from the very beginning. But there is so much depth in John that someone who is the equivalent of an elephant in terms of wisdom and intelligence, like Derek, could swim in it for years without ever mastering all of what is there. So we'll try to wade a little further than ankle deep, but even if that's as far as we get, we will gain something from our study of John, because there's so much there. Now, as always, I want to recommend that you read the entire gospel as often as possible as we work through it. Maybe I don't stress that enough when we're working through these passages, but you'll really gain so much more if you'll get involved in that way. In fact, one of my Greek teachers said, it's not knowing Greek that's going to help you have the fuller understanding more than anything else. It's reading and rereading and rereading, and then things begin to kind of fall together. So the Gospel of John has been a favorite for many people over the years. Matthew, Mark, and Luke are each very special in the way they are put together, but they all share a lot of the same stories, and they often tell them in the exact same words almost. Now, it's amazing how they can still each be unique while doing that. But John is unique not only in the way that he puts his material together, but in the very material he chooses. And there's an intimacy to John. It may partly be because he seemed to be the closest to Jesus, called the apostle that Jesus loved. He refers to himself not by name. This John that he mentioned in the prologue is not himself. That's John, the John that we call John the Baptist. But he just calls himself the one Jesus loved. He doesn't name himself. And one man that I know stayed up all night with the Gospel of John when he was a student at Mississippi State, or University of Mississippi, I think, struggling to find some meaning for his life because he had been unhappy up to that point. He said his life was changed by what he saw through the eyes of John. He came from a broken home. He was raised by an alcoholic mother, and he kind of took up the lifestyle that you might expect someone from that background to live. And then after encountering Jesus through the eyes of John, he became a Christian. And when I knew him, when Brenda knew him, he was the campus minister at Harding University. And now he's working with prisoners who are trying to put their lives back together. And so that's what John can do to a non-believer. But John is not only written to convince those who do not yet believe. John 20, if you look at your bulletin, read that article, and you're going to see that Jesus was not just writing for those who didn't believe, even though John 20 might be verses 30 and 31 might be taken that way. These things are written so that you might believe, but he's really writing just as much, if not more, to encourage those whose faith has begun to waver because it's been so many years, maybe 40 or 50 years, since Jesus ascended to heaven. And they were expecting him to return right away. And they certainly weren't expecting all of the persecution, even though if you read those verses in the bulletin article, you'll see that he did warn them about that persecution. But every one of us needs for our faith to be renewed or at least reinforced constantly. And that's one of the main reasons that we come together. That's why we're here. That's why it makes sense for us to study John or any of the Gospels. It's not a matter of hearing the sales pitch over and over again. We're not here to convert the converted. We've already bought into discipleship, and we don't need to do that again. But we do need to be reminded. We need to be encouraged. We need to be warned not to give up. There are some things about this life that are just not so pleasant. Now, Christmas is one of the two seasons that so many people celebrate who might not even be, very dedicated Christians. Easter is the other one. Well, the Easter story is found in all four Gospels because that is essential. But the Christmas story is not essential. It's a very sweet story. A poor young girl is chosen to bring a sweet little baby into the world, and angels sing. Shepherds, the gentle caretakers of the most innocent of animals, they come and worship him on his bed of straw while the big-eyed cattle and the furry donkeys look on. It's a beautiful story, and it's essential that it happened. But John doesn't tell about any of that. Mark doesn't tell about any of that. And it's not that they don't think it's important. It's just that that's already been told, and that's not what his readers need most at this time, in the case of John especially. They now need to deal with the harshness of the world's reaction to that man as, that baby grew up, the man that baby grew up to be. And they need to also deal with the harshness of the world's reaction to us when we have accepted him. So by the time that John writes, persecution is in full force, persecution of Christians. So John starts with the claims as to who Jesus was. He doesn't support them in the way that Matthew and Luke did with the genealogy of Jesus and showing the fulfillment of prophecy. He doesn't support it so much with the power and the authority that Mark shows from the beginning. He just starts out with the most outlandish claim, and that is that this man is the source of life. Jesus is the source of life. So these verses, 1 through 18, make claims about Jesus as the Word and his effect on us. They don't really make any effort to support these claims yet. That's what the whole gospel is about. But these claims should just help us to understand the purpose of everything that John writes. So John makes two outlandish claims, and the first one is that Jesus is unique. Uniqueness is one of those things that you either are or you aren't. It's like, you can't be a little bit pregnant or sort of pregnant. You can't be a little unique or somewhat unique or even very unique. Unique is unique. There's nothing else like it. It is one of a kind. It is exclusive. So if Jesus was in the beginning, then he is unique. Everything had to start from something, and that thing had to have no source, no beginning, as Aristotle, struggled with. It's impossible to wrap your mind around that, but it is impossible to deny it as well. So one thing that John leaves no room for is the idea that Jesus is just another great teacher. Now, Jesus was a great teacher, but not all of what he taught was completely new at the time he taught it. A lot of what he taught was just confirming what was in the Old Testament scriptures, but John makes the claim that Jesus was the source of all of that truth before he ever became flesh. In fact, he was the truth. That's what the Word is. Truth, logos, is the Greek word for it. And so the Jews of Jesus' day rarely denied that Jesus was from God. In fact, Nicodemus, who was not really fully a believer, he was a Pharisee, in fact. He comes to Jesus by night in chapter 3, and he'll say, "Rabbi," which means teacher, "we know you're from God." But that was a long way from saying what John has already said. "We know that you were in the beginning, and nothing has been made that was made without you." That's not what Nicodemus was saying. To most Jews, he was at least a prophet, or to some Jews, maybe even the prophet that they expected to come before the Christ was to come. But being a true prophet of God and even performing miracles didn't make him unique. Moses had done it. Elijah had done it. Elisha had done it. And now Jesus of Nazareth was doing it. Did you know that Muslims believe that Jesus was a true prophet of God? They do. But in their faith, he is one of a string of true prophets, and Muhammad was the next voice. And they now follow that. Only there's a problem with that idea. If Jesus took Moses' place and Elijah's place, and then Muhammad took Jesus' place, then what's to keep someone from taking Muhammad's place? Well, nothing. So now we're supposed to listen to a prophet who says Moses, Elijah, Jesus, and Muhammad were all true prophets of God. His name is Baha'u'llah. You've seen the signs for Baha'i? That's what they believe. He's the next voice. And so where will it stop? Well, the New Age philosophy would say it won't stop. All religions are seeking after the same God. There are just many different paths leading to the same place. Well, if we accept the Gospel of John as accurately representing Christianity, then either Jesus was unique or he was a fake. According to John, Jesus was the Word, not a word, not, true in his words. He was the Word. He was the truth and is the truth. See, the fact is that Buddha said some true things, some very true things. Muhammad said some true things. Confucius said some true things. Baha'u'llah said some true things. Joseph Smith, who founded Mormonism, said some true things. Mary Baker Eddy, who founded Christian Science, said some true things. Ellen G. White, who founded the Adventist Church, said some true things. But whatever anyone says that is true is something that God has revealed in one way or another already, and Jesus is God. That's what John says. And these so-called prophets have nothing to add to the one through whom everything was made and in whom is life. So as to whether others are even true prophets, you can't judge that by whether or not some of what they say is true. Some of what I say is true, and some of what you say is true, but is it all true? And here's the bigger question, is it original with us? A great English scholar named Samuel Johnson was given the manuscript of a book of a young writer he hoped to have published, and he was hoping to get Samuel Johnson's endorsement. And he asked him to read it, tell him what he thought about it. And so Johnson read it, and he returned it to him with this note. He said, "Your manuscript was both original and enlightening. Unfortunately, the parts that were enlightening were not original, and the parts that were original were not enlightening." That's the way it is. The words of all of these prophets who came after Jesus are sometimes both enlightening and original. Unfortunately, the parts that are enlightening are not original with them. They weren't the ones who came up with these truths. And the parts that are original, the new truths, are often very, very unenlightening and misleading. So, what I say may be enlightening, but it's not original if it is. And anything that I say that's truly original is not enlightening. John makes the claim that everything Jesus taught was not only enlightening but original. But it wasn't original because no one had ever said it before Jesus of Nazareth said it. They were original because he was the source of all truth before he ever became flesh. So at this point, John hasn't offered any evidence. He's just stating it as a fact. But if we believe that John is accurately reporting what Jesus taught his disciples and what he said about himself, then Jesus can't just be our favorite teacher. He's got to be the only one we trust. We can read and learn from anyone's teachings, but we've got to put our full trust in Jesus and only in Jesus. One of the things Jesus taught seems even more remarkable than Jesus' uniqueness, and that's what he taught about his effect on us. The second outlandish claim that John makes is that we can become unique. We can become what he is. And that is that we can become children of God. Did I put that? Yet to all who did receive him, to those who believed in his name, he gave the right to become children of God. Children born not of natural descent, nor of human decision or husband's will, but born of God. Now, the idea that we can be children of God, the words are so common to most of us by now that we may not realize just how outrageous an idea that is. I mean, it's outrageous to claim, I'm a son of the God of the universe, and I'm going to inherit the whole thing. But that's what John said. Now, again, John has yet to back up the claim, but this is what he is setting out to do. This is the journey we're about to go on with him. John hopes that by the time he is finished, that we will believe, either for the first time or more strongly than ever, depending on where we are now, that Jesus had the power and the will to make us a part of the family. There was a story told back in the Soviet era, in communist Russia. A Russian school child was asked by his teacher, "Who is your father?" And the child gave the answer that she wanted to hear, that they had been indoctrinated to hear: Stalin. "Well, who is your mother?" the teacher asked. "The great Soviet Union." And then, wanting to reward the child for giving the right answers, the teacher asked, "Now, what do you want more than anything in the world?" The child said, "To be an orphan." Haven't we all wished that we were born just a little better than we were? I mean, maybe you loved your parents, but couldn't they have been richer or smarter or more talented or better looking or influential? There might even be some of us, who at one time wished we were orphans if our parents had certain problems. But there's a better wish than to be an orphan if you don't like your parents so much. Having no parents might be better than having certain parents, but that's not the only option. We can be adopted. We can choose our Father. We can choose to be a part of the family of God. All we have to do, John says, is to receive Jesus as Lord. Of course, that doesn't mean we just say it, but that we really do it. But look at these words again. Yet to all who did receive him, to those who believed in his name, he gave the right to become children of God. That's our right, to be born of God. Now, why in the world would God want more children? Wouldn't you think he'd quit while he was ahead? Well, giving ourselves immortality is one reason that some people, think they want to have children. But you know what? It's a lousy reason for us to have children. You might even say it's sort of the ultimate narcissism. But it would be completely useless for an immortal God with a perfect and immortal son to adopt a crew like us, to achieve immortality. That's ridiculous. He's immortal already. His son is immortal. Now, there are parents who adopt children more for their own fulfillment than for the child. And that's no different from giving birth to children for your own fulfillment. I'm giving birth to children for your own fulfillment. So it's not quite right. But usually when people adopt children who have reached school age, for example, or especially the teenage years, you know someone who's adopted a teenager, personal fulfillment is not the reason. Older children are usually adopted because they need to be adopted. They need love. They often aren't very lovable or very loving, but they sure do need someone to love them. I'm not saying that adopting them can't be fulfilling, but you'd better not count on it, if you go into adopting a child who's already perhaps been abused and has certain patterns and problems in their life. Well, God didn't adopt us because he was needing to complete himself. You remember the scene, I think we played the clip of Tom Cruise delivering that immortal line, you complete me. Well, God doesn't need us to complete him. He is and always has been complete. He doesn't need fulfillment in that way. He has adopted us because we need his love. We're not very lovable much of the time, like a lot of teenagers that need to be adopted, and we're often not very loving toward him, but we sure do need the kind of love that he offers. And so that actually does, in a sense, fulfill him, because God is love. He needs an object of his love, but it's not because it's just going to be a wonderful, warm experience. So we need unconditional love. We need no strings attached love, but we need firm discipline. And he allows us to make our mistakes while constantly reaching out to us to try to save us from ourselves. So that kind of love really changes lives, and we are living evidence of that. But isn't it amazing that we so often live in such a way as to make everyone say, I'm glad he's not my kid. I feel sorry for his parents. I like the Good News translation of verse 16, the Good News Bible. Out of the fullness of his grace, he has blessed us all, giving us one blessing after another. All of this seems, when you think about it, stand back, think about this, all of it seems too good to be true. But this is what John is claiming from the very beginning of his gospel. And he makes it clear how he intends to support this claim. No one has ever seen God, but the one and only Son, who is himself God and is in closest relationship with the Father, has made him known, has revealed him. So we can know that this is true only through Jesus. All of these claims that John makes, this promise that John refers to, that we can become children of God. And that's also true, the claims about Jesus' uniqueness. We can only know that through Jesus himself, through the demonstration. But what a demonstration it really is. So, where are these two realities going to lead us? What difference does it make that Jesus is unique? How does being adopted as children of God change our lives? Well, let me give you a hint in the form of a question. What is John known as? The apostle of love, okay? So our destination is love. Now, some of us might be thinking, oh boy, here we go again. Everything revolves around love. What about obedience? What about fear and guilt? What about obedience and fear? Well, let's try, if our destination is love, obeying this command that Jesus will give later in John. He says, I'm giving you a new commandment. Love one another. Well, what about fear? Well, John gives much later on in the letters, much later after the time that he's talking about in John, maybe not all that much later than he wrote the Gospel of John, but in what may be one of the last letters written, if not probably not the last, but close to it. In 1 John 4:18, he says, perfect love casts out fear. When I was about an 8th grader, I had a friend. We lived in Wichita, Kansas for 3 years. And so my 6th, 7th, and 8th grade years. And one of my friends' father worked for Boeing. And they had, a little kind of a club for their employees. And so they had a swimming pool, which was, to me, was a really cool thing. And I got to go swimming with him at the Boeing swimming pool. All that's kind of irrelevant, except that I just remember they were playing over the loudspeaker, sort of the newest Beatles hit. It was written by John Lennon. All you need is love. And I remember thinking, wow, the Beatles got it right. It wasn't, it was enlightening, but it was really not original, was it? And he probably thought it was original, but think about another song that he wrote that was sort of original, but really not enlightening. The song Imagine, which a lot of people love, suggests that we'd all be better off without religion, without the ideas of heaven or hell, if we just lived for today. So how do we get there? Well, it's not through John Lennon's teachings or Vladimir Lenin's teachings of the communist faith. Actually, we have a perfect GPS to get us there. You remember GPSs when they said recalculating? Some of you may still have that. You take a wrong turn and it tells you you're recalculating. Well, Siri doesn't tell us that we're recalculating for a long, long time. For some reason, you turn, it takes her a long time to accept that you're not going to go the way that she originally told you to go. But the old GPS, as soon as you took a wrong turn, it would say recalculating. It would give you another option, another way to go, or just tell you to do a U-turn. And eventually Siri will do that now too. But, Jesus is the ultimate GPS. He is not ever going to let us go the wrong way without giving us a guide as to how to get back on track. And that's what John is all about. So let's join together in just opening our hearts to his leading in this whole study of John. And I think we're going to not only enjoy it, but we're going to be we're not going to just be comforted, but we'll be a little afflicted. So let's think about that. If you're at a place where you want to bring something to us to help you with, and we're certainly will encourage you to do that this morning, whether it's to be baptized yourself and follow in his name, or just to ask for help, or do that personally. You don't have to do that publicly. Come to us, but don't let a realization that you need to take a step in his direction pass. Keep that realization with you until you actually follow through on it, okay? Let's stand together and let's sing.